Look at her, she's glowing like a queen. Unlike you who couldn't even keep a man. Those were the first words my ex-husband's new wife spat at me as she swept into the hall in her overpriced gown, dripping with smugness. The air tightened around me, every guest pretending not to hear but stealing glances, waiting for my reaction. I swallowed, my throat burning like fire. Hi everyone, my name is Clara, and sometimes life doesn't hand you betrayals in whispers. It throws them at you in chandeliers and champagne. Have you ever watched someone try to erase you, rewrite you out of your own family story as if you never mattered? That was the stage set tonight. A wedding painted with white roses, silver plates, and 1,000 eyes pretending to celebrate love, when really it was a battlefield. The groom was my ex-husband. The bride. A woman younger than me, desperate to replace me not only in his life, but in my son's heart. And my 14-year-old boy Ethan sat beside me, his jaw tight, fists balled under the tablecloth. I could hear the violinists playing, but beneath their strings, I heard something sharper. The silence before a storm. She strutted, whispering to guests about how I couldn't keep a family together. Her smirk caught the light like a knife's edge. I wanted to rise. To scream. To claw back every ounce of dignity she tried to shred in front of strangers. But I stayed still, frozen. My son's hand touched mine under the table, his grip trembling but steady. His eyes, God, those eyes, told me something. He wasn't going to let her win. Not tonight. Not ever. And when the priest raised his voice for vows, Ethan stood up. That was the moment the wedding cracked open like glass under pressure, because my son didn't just have anger in his chest, he had proof. If this ever happened to you, say, same in the comments. Ethan's chair scraped against the marble floor, the sound slicing through the violin strings. Heads turned. A hush fell over the wedding hall so thick I swear you could hear the candles flicker. The priest faltered, his hand frozen midair with the Bible. My ex's smug little bride tilted her chin and smirked, whispering loud enough for the front rows to hear. Oh, here we go. Mommy's boy wants attention. But Ethan didn't flinch. He stood taller than I'd ever seen him, his young voice steady, sharp as steel. Attention, he repeated. You want attention? Then let's give them something real to look at. Gasps spread like wildfire. His fists unclenched, and in one swift move, he slammed a folded stack of papers onto the altar. The sound echoed. The bride blinked, confused, until Ethan's words ripped the air apart. These are screenshots. Messages. Videos. Proof of what she's been doing behind my dad's back. The silence collapsed into chaos. Guests whispered, chairs squeaked, some even stood. My ex-husband's face drained of color, his jaw locked, eyes darting between his son and his soon-to-be wife. I sat frozen, heart hammering, watching my boy carry the weight of a truth I had been too broken to speak. Because I knew those papers. I had seen fragments, hints of betrayal, her late-night texts, the way she vanished for errands. But Ethan had gathered it all. Quietly. Patiently. With the focus of a soldier preparing for war. You wanted to replace my mom, Ethan said, his voice breaking but unshaken. But all you really did was prove you're worse than him. He pointed at my ex, and trust me, that's saying a lot. The bride's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she reached for the stack, but Ethan yanked it back, holding it high like a torch. Don't touch, he hissed. You had your spotlight. Now burn in it. For a moment the hall didn't breathe. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop their shimmer. And in that silence, something cracked inside me too. The humiliation I'd been drowning in began to shift, turning into something else. Not anger. Not relief. But the beginning of justice. The wedding hall had transformed. No longer pews and petals. It was a courtroom, and my son had just sworn himself in as both witness and prosecutor. The bride's manicured fingers clawed at her veil, her voice trembling yet desperate to hold control. He's a child. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But Ethan cut her off, his voice slicing clean. A child? Then what does that make you, begging a teenager not to send your pictures to dad? The crowd erupted. Hands over mouths, eyes wide, whispers flying like arrows. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered against the floor like the last illusion of her innocence. My ex finally snapped out of his daze, his voice booming across the altar. Ethan, sit down. This is not the place. But Ethan didn't sit. He stepped closer, eyes blazing. No, Dad. This is exactly the place. You brought us here. You dragged me and Mom into this circus so you could play happy husband. Well, guess what? Your wife-to-be was busy calling another man baby, while she was picking out this dress. The bride gasped, her face red, lips trembling, mascara smudging with the sweat of exposure. Lies. He's making it up. Ethan tossed a printed screenshot onto the altar. It slid to the priest's feet. The old man bent, picked it up and froze, the words clear as day lit by the chandeliers above. Last night was perfect. Can't wait to sneak out again while he's at work. I love you. The priest's hand shook. The crowd's whispers turned into gasps, then sharp intakes of breath that seemed to choke the air. Me. I sat still, but tears threatened to betray me. Not sadness. No, those tears burned with something else. Pride. Fierce, raw pride for the boy standing like a warrior where I once crumbled. My ex grabbed the papers, skimming them, his face going pale with each word. His hands trembled, but he still shouted, desperate. This is out of context. But Ethan didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone, holding it high. Out of context? Then maybe we should watch the videos. Right here. Right now. In front of everyone. The hall fell silent again, so silent it felt like the chandeliers themselves were listening. And I knew in that moment, this wedding would never finish with vows. It would end with a verdict. The groom's face was a battlefield, rage, panic, denial, while the bride clutched her chest like the fabric itself might shield her from truth. Ethan's phone glowed in his hand. One tap and the speakers of the hall filled with sound. Not violin strings, not wedding bells. But her voice. Don't call. Text me when he leaves. I'll sneak out. God, he's so clueless. Then a man's chuckle. Her laugh, breathless. Can't wait to be in your arms again. This wedding will be our biggest joke yet. The video ended with a timestamp, just 2 nights ago. The room detonated. Gasps, curses, someone muttering, "Oh my God." Guests shuffled back in their seats as if the sound itself might stain them. The bride's mother buried her face in her hands. The groom's best man whispered something under his breath and walked out, shaking his head. The bride lunged for Ethan's phone, shrieking, "Delete it. You don't understand." But Ethan stepped back, voice steady, cold. "Oh, I understand. You thought you could erase my mom. Replace her. Humiliate her. But you forgot one thing. Truth doesn't stay buried. And tonight, everyone sees you for what you are." Her knees buckled. She sank against the altar rail, mascara streaming down like war paint gone wrong. My ex staggered, clutching the back of a chair for balance. His pride, his carefully staged fairy tale, was crumbling in front of hundreds. His lips trembled, but no words came. The priest finally spoke, his voice heavy, stern. "This ceremony cannot continue. The vows you intended to exchange are built on lies. God does not bless deception." The bride wailed, trying to grab his arm. "Please, it's not what it looks like." But Ethan spoke before anyone else could. "It looks exactly like what it is. You wanted the spotlight, now burn in it." Silence. Pure cutting silence. And for the first time in years I breathed, not like a woman abandoned, but like a queen watching her kingdom reclaim itself. Yet I knew this wasn't the end. Because when truth slices this deep, it doesn't stop at humiliation. It demands justice. The wedding hall, once dripping in crystal and roses, now smelled of fear and sweat. Guests didn't whisper anymore. They argued in low, frantic voices, some leaving, some staying as if they couldn't tear their eyes from the wreck. The bride sat crumpled at the altar, her veil torn, her face streaked black with running mascara. Her hands trembled, clutching at my ex-husband's sleeve, but he wrenched away, his voice breaking for the first time. You made a fool of me." Her head snapped up, wild, desperate. "No. They're lies, manipulated." Ethan cut her off like a judge with a gavel. "Lies? Then explain why the man in that video is calling you by name. Explain why your hotel bill matches the night you said you were wedding dress shopping." Gasps rippled again. A woman in the second row muttered, "Shameless." A man shook his head, disgust painted across his face. The bride's mask was gone now. She wasn't a queen or a rival or a glowing bride. She was cornered prey, darting her eyes left and right, searching for an exit. But the exits were blocked by shame. My ex's face twisted, rage building. He turned to Ethan, his voice sharp, desperate to regain control. You had no right to do this here. Ethan's jaw set. No right. You invited us here to parade her in front of us, to humiliate my mom by replacing her like she was nothing. I just returned the favor, with truth. The priest, pale and weary, closed the Bible. This union cannot proceed. The sanctity of this hall has been violated by deceit. Leave now. But leaving wasn't that simple. Because one of the guests, an older man in a tailored suit, stood from the back, clearing his throat. His voice was calm but carried the weight of law. My name is Judge Whitaker. I was invited as a family friend, but I cannot sit silent. What this boy has presented tonight is not just disgrace. It borders on fraud. The hall froze again. Fraud. The word hung heavier than the chandeliers. The bride's eyes widened in terror. My ex stumbled, shaking his head, muttering, this can't be happening. But it was. The wedding had become a courtroom, the aisle now a witness stand, and justice had stepped forward uninvited. And I realized, this wasn't just a ruined ceremony. It was the beginning of their reckoning. The bride's sobs tore through the silence, ugly and raw. She dropped to her knees in front of the judge, clutching at the hem of his suit. Please. You don't understand. I was scared. I didn't want to lose him. I made mistakes, but isn't love allowed mistakes? Her voice cracked, trembling like glass on the edge of shatter. Some guests shifted, uncomfortable, but nobody stepped forward to help her. Ethan crossed his arms, his voice sharp, cutting through her wails. Love isn't sneaking into hotel rooms and laughing about it the week of your wedding. Love isn't mocking my mom while stabbing my dad in the back. The judge's expression remained stone. Fraud before vows is not a mistake, it's intent. And if these messages and videos are authentic, this marriage has no legal standing. The bride whipped her head toward my ex, her once flawless curls sticking to her face. Tell them it's nothing, please. Tell them you love me. But my ex didn't speak. His silence screamed louder than words. And then, like venom, she turned her eyes on me. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She spat. You put him up to this. You poisoned your son against me. The guests gasped, turning to look at me. My chest tightened, but before I could even breathe, Ethan stepped forward, his voice steel. Don't you dare. Don't you dare drag my mom into this. She didn't ask for this. I did this. I saved him from you. The bride's face crumpled, but there was no pity left in the room. Even her bridesmaids edged away as though shame itself was contagious. And then came the sound no bride should ever hear. The groom, my ex-husband, slammed his ring box shut. The click echoed like a gavel. This wedding is over, he growled. Her scream split the hall, a sound not of sorrow but of rage, pure guttural rage at losing the crown she thought she'd stolen. She lunged toward the altar, knocking candles, flowers, anything she could grab. But no matter how she raged, the truth had already scorched her veil to ashes. And as security stepped in to hold her back, I realized something strange. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt seen. Because it wasn't just my son who had defended me. It was the truth itself. The hall was chaos incarnate. Candles toppled, roses trampled, voices rising like a storm that refused to end. Yet in the center of it all, the bride knelt on the marble, veil torn, makeup smeared, her sobs no longer delicate but animalistic. Phones were out now. Guests who once smiled for wedding photos now filmed her downfall with shaking hands. Flashes of light cut across her face, each click sealing her humiliation in digital permanence. One bridesmaid whispered, "This will be everywhere by morning." Another muttered, "She'll never show her face again." Ethan stood motionless, watching her unravel. His eyes weren't full of hate, just a cold, unshakable clarity. He didn't look like a boy anymore. He looked like justice given flesh. My ex gripped the altar for balance, sweat dripping down his temple. Every dream he'd built on this marriage, on her, was caving in under the weight of betrayal. He glanced at me just once, and I swear for the first time in years. His eyes carried something like regret. But regret couldn't fix this. Not anymore. The bride screamed, thrashing against the guards now holding her back. "You're all hypocrites. You think you're better than me? You'll see, I'll ruin every one of you." Her words echoed, desperate and empty, while cameras rolled and whispers spread. Judge Whitaker raised a hand, silencing the madness. His voice was iron. This disgrace is no longer private. This is fraud, deception, and slander of character. If I were you, he told my ex, I'd speak with a lawyer before the sun rises. The bride froze, her chest heaving, realization dawning that this wasn't just about humiliation, it was about consequences. Real, legal consequences. The priest quietly closed the Bible and stepped down from the altar, muttering prayers under his breath. Guests rose from their seats, some shaking their heads, others rushing to the exits. The fairy tale was ashes. The wedding was over. And there, in the flicker of dying candles and shattered roses, my son took my hand. His grip was steady, certain. "She can't touch us anymore, Mom," he whispered. For the first time I believed him. But justice wasn't finished yet. Because humiliation fades. Courtrooms don't. 2 weeks later, the chandeliers were gone, the roses replaced with mahogany benches, and the altar with a judge's gavel. The wedding hall's whispers had become courtroom silence. The bride sat at the defendant's table, no veil, no gown, just a wrinkled blazer that couldn't mask the ruin carved into her face. Cameras still followed her, reporters scribbling as though her shame were currency. My ex sat beside her, but the distance between them was a canyon. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't even look her way. The man who once thought she'd be his crown now wore humiliation like chains. Ethan sat beside me, shoulders straight, gaze unwavering. He was no longer just my boy. He was the reason truth had risen when I couldn't. The judge spoke, his voice like thunder rolling through the chamber. Presented evidence confirms deception, intent to defraud, and willful humiliation of the petitioner and his family. The attempted marriage contract is null. Legal penalties shall follow. The gavel came down. The sound was final, like a coffin ceiling. The bride broke. She collapsed into her hands, sobbing not for love lost, but for status, money, and the spotlight that slipped through her fingers. She had wanted to stand above me in a crown of white. Instead, she sat beneath me in a courtroom of shame. My ex turned, his eyes meeting mine for just a second. There was no hatred left in me for him, only pity. He had chosen his path and it had led him here. Alone. Ethan leaned close, whispering words that seared into my soul. She wanted the spotlight. We gave her the fire. And he was right. Because justice hadn't come with fists or fury. It had come with truth, with exposure, with a boy refusing to let lies bury his mother's dignity. When we walked out of that courtroom, the cameras swiveled toward us. But for once I didn't bow my head. I held it high. I had been mocked, humiliated, discarded. But in the end I didn't need revenge. I had something sharper. The truth. And a son brave enough to wield it. The doors shut behind us. The chapter closed.